G'day. I just finished my first and likely only playthrough I'll do of Dragon's Dogma 2, and I feel kinda bamboozled. This sequel, in so many ways, feels like the fully realised version of what the team wanted the first game to be back in 2012. And that's great, except the game we got in 2012 already had updates introduced to improve it via the Dark Arisen re-release. And it's not 2012 anymore. We've had so many amazing games come out since that have tried to refresh the open world formula. I think a person who is coming into this game without having played the first won't have the same negative experiences as me, and for hardcore fans that have put hundreds or thousands of hours into DD1, they'll probably only have a positive experience with this one. Why I feel a little bamboozled is due to so many of the things people criticized in the first game being brought right back in for the sequel, and instead of just pushing forward to wrap the game up, I actually took the time to play for longer, thinking that surely there would be more unique content and encounters to be found, only to be met with disappointment. First up, the exploration. I think it's really great in this game because there are a lot of beautiful sights to see and dungeons to find with unique loot, some that I actually held on to for a long while, whereas others were immediately outclassed by gear found in shops. When you're leaving Vermund and looking up towards the mountains or reach the top of a cliff and can look out into the distant areas you've been to, it all just looks gorgeous and incredible. And I was actually excited to collect some port crystals to start mapping out my own places to fast travel to, but unlike Dark Arisen that made fairy stones more affordable, the item you use for fast traveling, and gave us more port crystals to drop down as well as an unlimited use fast travel. Now the fairy stones cost 10 grand each, and for the first 15 hours of game time I only had 2 port crystals to put down. There are 2 permanent ones that are placed in the world, one in the main city of Vermund and one in a fishing village. For some reason, there are none in the second city of Batal. This is the second main area that you'll be going to for a lot of quests, and for some reason, there's just no permanent port crystal here. Having to walk from place to place or take ox carts probably doesn't sound too bad until you find out about the lack of enemy variety that will constantly interrupt your travels. Enemy variety was near non-existent in the first game when traveling the open world, and not only is that in the sequel, but it's arguably even worse because there are more encounters to be found along a path now. You'll leave the city, fight some goblins, then harpies 20 meters up the road, maybe more goblins a little further up, or they'll change it up with some wolves. There's almost always an ogre when you're taking the northern road out of Vermund. At night, it barely changes with the introduction of zombies and skeletons that basically just act as different skins of the same enemy types you've already fought. I was happy to see that not a single main quest at the start of the game told me to go to an area filled with bandits who could one-shot me, so that was a nice change from DD1. I think the core combat and the abilities that are available through the different vocations are really a lot of fun, and they are supposed to shine when you're fighting the bigger foes. Unfortunately, enemy variety is lacking for this aspect as well, and it sucks to see a lot of them are just repeats of what we saw in the first game. Movesets aren't as unique as varied in those that you would find in something like Monster Hunter World, and a lot of them are repeated as often as the fodder enemies, so you'll probably find yourself ignoring most encounters and just trying to run past everything. I found 6 enemies that I would say are unique, excluding the main dragon that takes your heart, Medusa, who can respawn anyway, so it's essentially a repeated enemy, the Sphinx, which is actually an interesting quest line, one of the few pieces of side content that isn't shit, unfortunately, the Dullahan, which apparently can appear in the open world. I think he's just more on the rare side, Talos, a boss that doesn't even need you present for it to die in a cutscene. It's completely pointless for this thing to exist. And 2 bosses that appear in the true ending, which themselves are both repeated. So even when you get to this endgame area, you get 2 brand new enemies that are repeated anyway, instead of giving us 4 unique boss fights. The worm thing you fight is terribly boring, but the dragon was a little more on the fun side, even though I was very powerful and it was quite easy in encounter overall. Another big thing I didn't like that seemed to be carried over from DD1 was the mostly uninteresting story. Overall, DD2 acts as a complete repeat of the first game's story, hence the game in general feeling like a re-release rather than a proper sequel. But even the political storyline of a queen trying to maintain control of the throne for her family is mostly absent and is not engaging. The fake Arisen who is put onto the throne just ceases to exist at a certain point in the story. And I don't mean someone in the game deletes him from existence or kills him or something. I mean the character and model itself just stops existing, is never seen again, and nobody mentions it. Nobody talks about him having been a thing the whole time. The whole story of this false Arisen and the political deceit goes fucking nowhere, and it never does anything outside of making you run in and out of the castle multiple times. So what we get with Dragon's Dogma 2 is a really fun combat system that quickly becomes boring due to a severe lack of enemy variety and even variety in movesets, and it's way too easy to become too powerful. We have a beautiful world that is genuinely interesting to explore, but is dragged down by annoying encounters that start to feel like a hindrance. A story that is largely uninteresting, performance issues, and really scummy and unneeded microtransactions. It wasn't at all unknown what people didn't like about the first game, and to see all those things return anyway is so disheartening. If some sort of Dark Arisen expansion comes to this one to improve the game and offer more varied content, I'll think about returning, but I definitely feel like a chump for having put as much time into it as I have. Till the next video, have a good one.